Hello, hello. The topic of today's lesson is to divide decimals by decimals. As always, we're trying to solve easy examples first, and examples get more and more challenging with every time. By that, we build proficiency. So let's take a look at what this textbook is giving us. I really love how they explain this topic. We are on page 49 in textbook 5B. This is chapter 8, subunit 4, division by decimals. So let's take a look. What are we dividing here first? We are dividing by 1/10. We are dividing 30 by 100, and we are dividing 30 by 1,000. And then we can consider the next examples after that. So let's take a look. My friends, I do hope you remember, even from previous lesson on multiplication, that 0.1 is the same, to divide by 0.1 is the same as to divide by 1/10. Right? To divide by 100, we can also write it as to divide by 1 out of 100. And to divide by 1,000, we can write it as divide by 1 out of 1,000, right? Which is something we've learned earlier this year when we were looking at how to divide by fraction. So let me continue with this topic, with this theme. How do we divide by fraction? To divide by a fraction is the same as to multiply the number by the reciprocal of that fraction. So to divide by 1/10 is the same as to multiply by the reciprocal, which is 10 over 1, or just 10. To divide by 100 is the same as multiplying by 100 over 1, which is a reciprocal of 100. And to divide by 1,000 is the same in mathematics as to multiply by the reciprocal of 1,000, which is just 1,000. So what we do have, and I want you to understand that as we divide by a fraction, we, by a decimal, we can end up with much larger quotients. For example, 30 divided by 1/10 is the same as 30. Let me write it here. Is the same as 30 multiplied by the reciprocal of 1/10, which is 30 times 10 equals 300. That's one point of view. Let's continue with this point of view. 30 divided by 100 is the same as to multiply by its reciprocal, which is 30 times 100 equals 3,000. You see how our quotient is becoming bigger. And final example. Let's use the same point of view. To divide by 1,000 means to multiply by the reciprocal of that fraction, which is 30 times 1,000 equals 30,000, right? Equals 30,000. So here, I prove to you that to divide by 0.1, 0.100, or 1,000 is the same as to multiply by reciprocal, which we already knew. I just pointed it out once again. Now, so that's one way of looking at it. Another point of view is we can always write division. Remember, in mathematics, division can be represented as a fraction. So we can write division horizontally, or we can write division vertically. So 30 divided by 100 is like 30 over 0.01. And 30 divided by 1,000, we can rewrite it in the vertical way, is 30 divided by 1,000. Okay, so let's continue with that point of view. What happens when we divide, when we look at it as a fraction? My friends, I want you to see that here it is. When we have fractional denominators, we really don't like it. Let me point out our fractional denominators right here, in red. Fractional denominators. We really don't like them, and they're here, they are here and here. We really don't like having fractional denominators. So what we really need to do is create an equivalent fraction and get rid of this fractional denominator. So to come up with an equivalent, we need to multiply the bottom by 10. What we do to the bottom, we must do to the top. That's the way equivalent fractions work. We learned it in 3rd grade. And here we have it. Here we have it. We have times 10 on the top, times 10 on the bottom, resulting in the same 300 over 1. 300 over 1, which is the same answer we got when we used my point of view. Let me write POV, point one, point of view number one, point of view number one, point of view number one, right? That was the perspective when we divide by a decimal. It's the same as multiplying by a reciprocal. Now, the second point of view is we can rewrite it as a fraction. And when we rewrite it as a fraction, it's very important that we do not have decimals in numerator or denominator. So we must come up with an equivalent to get rid of them. And the equivalent is we multiply the bottom and the top by 100. And what do we see? Here we have it. We have an equivalent fraction that results in 3,000 divided by 1. 3,000 divided by 1. Okay, wonderful. Now, and final example, let's take a look. Again, we represent horizontal division as a vertical fraction, and we really don't like fractions or decimals in a denominator, so we need to get rid of them by figuring out the equivalent. Let's multiply by 1,000. What we do to the bottom, we must do to the top. And here we have it. We have an equivalent right here. We multiply it by 1,000 in the top and the bottom. And here we have it. We have 30,000 divided by 1. 30,000 divided, 30,000 divided by 1, which is exactly the same answer we got the first time. So notice our answers, of course, match up. We just use different points of view. Now, let's translate this into vertical division, not vertical, long division. So here's point of view number 3, right? POV or method 3. Use long division. Now, long division works almost the same. You just have to kind of get used to the perspective. We're dividing 30 by 0.1. Again, we really do not like decimal quotients. What do we need to do? It's as if what we need to do, we multiply by 10. What we do to the left, we must do to the right, multiply both by 10 to get rid of this decimal place. And we have an equivalent division statement, 300 over 1, which of course results in the answer of 300. Now, similarly, look at how long division point of view. Again, we have a decimal right here. We have a decimal in a quotient, and not the quotient, divisor. We do not like decimals in divisor. Let's multiply the divisor times 100 and the dividend times 100, and we come up with an equivalent statement, 3,000 divided by 1, which of course gives us 3,000. The math is quite easy. And finally, so on. Look, when we're dividing by thousands, we really dislike decimals in place of our divisors. So we need to multiply by 1,000 on the left to get rid of the decimal place. What we do to the left, we must do to the right. So that moves our decimal point, and we end up with an equivalent. It's an equivalent statement, right? Equivalent division, 30,000 divided by 1, which gives us the answer of 30,000. Let's practice this. I think enough theory. Let's practice. I'm on page 50. And I hope you see in 50, part 1, step 1, right? What we do first is let's divide the first column. Look, in the first column, we are dividing by 100s. We're dividing by 100s. Well, I hope you recall from the lesson just 5 minutes ago that to divide, let's write it down. To divide by 0.1 is the same as to multiply, is to divide by 1/10, which is the same as to multiply by reciprocal of 10. So right here, we're basically doing the same operation as multiplying by 10. So 1/10 of 500? No, and so sorry. What I'm asking is how many times 0.1 goes into 500? Or I can ask you another way, what is 500 times 10, right? And the answer is 5,000. 50 divided by 1/10 equals 500. 10 times more. 5 divided by 1/10 gives you 50, also 10 times more. Remember, it's as if we're multiplying by 10. And 0.5 times 10 would be 5, and 500 times 10 gives you 5/10, and 5,000 times 10 gives you 500. Notice the decimal point moves we're increasing our number. We're moving the decimal place to the right, one space to the right. We're increasing our number 10 times. Now, let's take a look at the next column. Look, B, E, H, K, and Q, we are dividing by 100ths. Every single equation, here we need to solve divide by 100ths. Remember from the lesson earlier, to divide by 0.01, we can rewrite it. I mean, this is just a proof. You don't have to think of it every time. It's the same as to divide by 1 out of 100, which is the same as to multiply by reciprocal, which is 100 over 1. So right here, basically, what we need to do is multiply by 100, okay? Also, another way to ask ourselves the same question is, how many times 100 goes into 500? And it is 100 times more, so it's 50, 1, 2, 3, 50,000. The next one is 5,000. The next one is 5 and 2 zeros. The next one is we have 50. The next is we have 5. And here we have 0.5. The answer, or here it's quotient, we call it, increases 100 times. Notice what happened to the decimal point. We had a decimal point and we moved it 2 places to the right, 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 oops, 2 places, 2 places, 2 places, 2 places, boom, boom, 2 places to the right. So I don't want you to remember the rule, which way you move the decimal. I want you to use your logic and knowledge of operations of math and fractions to figure this out. But of course, if you already remember the rule, that's perfectly okay. Now, in the last column, let's take a look at this pattern. Let's take a look at this pattern. We are again dividing by a decimal. In this case, we're dividing by 1 out of thousands, right? So to divide by 1,000, so we can write it down right here. To divide by 0.001, we can rewrite it as to divide it by 1 out of 1,000, right? And how do we divide by a fraction? It's the same as multiplying by a reciprocal, which is 1,000 over 1. So here, we're basically increasing the dividend 1,000 times. And the answer is 500, 1, 2, 3,000, 50, 1, 2, 3,000, 5, 1, 2, 3,000. Here, 0.5. We move the decimal place 1, 2, 3, and we get 500. And here we get 50. And here we move the decimal place 1, 2, 3 places, and the answer is 5. Now let's take a look at the next one. What we're doing here, number 2, we have parts A and parts B. So here it's again another point of view on division. Find the value of each of the following. So we have this equation. 6 divided by 3. I can ask you, how many times 3 goes into 6? And you say, Miss Natasha, easy peasy, 3 goes into 6 2 times. Okay, that was, we learned it back in 3rd grade. Now let's bring you to 5th grade. How many times 3/10 goes into 6? Well, 3 went into 6 2 times. 3/10 must go into 6 10 times more. So it is 20. Now again, let me represent another point of view. We can say 6 divided by 3 as a fraction, and we can simplify it as 2. Or we can write it like this, 6 divided by 0.3 as a fraction. Of course, we never like decimals in the denominator, so we must come up with an equivalent fraction. And look what we have. The equivalent is 60 divided by 3, which is 20. That's a different point of view. I hope this lesson helped you understand the patterns in division by decimals.